Good morning, guys. Welcome to this week's podcast. You'll be pleased to know we've actually got a proper guest back on with us this week, so you don't need to listen to Paul and I pontificating. However, this week's guest has put a huge spanner in the works when it comes to our kind of philosophy about how, where and what we do these podcasts. You will remember that Paul and I said that we like to go for approximately 20 minutes because that was roughly speaking the distance or time that we like to go for a run for. And I know, somewhere around 5K. Maybe back in the day. So anyway, our guest this week is Chantal Cummings. Chantal is a long-term friend of Sandstone, actually, and been one of our ambassadors for a really long time. And when it comes to running, I'll probably get this wrong, but she's effectively a pro and elite Ironman triathlete, which means that she runs significantly further and faster than either Paul or I put together. So we couldn't quite decide whether we had to do 5K but in 3 minutes or whether we had to do 40 minutes to cover the distance she goes for. But either way, she's here and she's going to listen to us. And our kind of loose theme for today, as we always have, is we're going to talk about sort of making it work, really, because Chantal is the absolute sort of living proof of that. A lot of people don't realise, with very few exceptions, that most of the elite iron distance triathletes that you see absolutely have to make it work. They have to sort of fund their own way. Most of them have to work. They're effectively amateurs. They have all sorts of stuff they have to do just to even get to the start line, let alone get to the finish line, which is a bit I kind of can't contemplate, frankly. So anyway, Chantal, welcome. Really nice to have you with us today.
Hi guys, really great to be on and speaking to you.
For any of you out there, now I know there's at least 3 or 4 people listening, well, just listening to this podcast full stop really, but I know there's at least 3 or 4 people that if they were honest, sitting somewhere in their garage is a bike, a push bike that costs more money than their car. Now, we're not going to ask you to identify yourselves because probably some of your other halves aren't aware of that fact, which I totally get. And it's kind of all started when we met Chantal because she was in need of some wheels, and we caught up with possibly one of the coolest bikes I've ever seen, which is her kind of now obviously pink and blue time trial bike, which is an absolute sort of weapon of a piece of kit. And it was one of those things that I felt like I needed in the lounge because it looks way too uncomfortable to try and ride the thing. But actually, when you look at that, what you become aware of is it's totally tuned to a particular purpose. Kind of nothing is left unturned, is it? And I don't know, Chantal, how about when you have chat us through some of the details you have to go to, like when you're prepping for a race? It's just, I can't believe the level of detail you have to go into.
Yeah, so the bike is obviously one part of what I need to get ready for a race. There's a lot of things that take time to do before a race. Changing the wheels, which I know sounds crazy because it comes with a fantastic set of wheels, but you've got to upgrade it to the next level. It's actually funny, the other day I was sorting out insurance for my bikes and it cost approximately double my car insurance to give you an idea of the value of what I'm trying to insure. But there are a lot of things. So, from wetsuits to the race suit, which I have, and the inclusion of all of my sponsors to make sure everyone gets the promotion during the race. But yeah, the week before the race is pretty full on in getting everything prepped and ready, from a training setup to a race setup. It's mostly the wheels for me and the setting up the hydration. The rest of it is pretty much similar to how I train, so that I can be used to what I'm using when I come to race day.
I remember talking about preparation. I think you and I were working together, and I was probably having a glass of wine and you were probably drinking something like water. And I vaguely remember you showing me a photograph of you in the dark in your other half's parents' back garden on a turbo trainer, which could be described as niche. But do you want to talk us through what was going on there?
Yeah, so that was back in the days when I was trying to transition from age grouper to professional athlete, and I was having to run my full-time job alongside training and racing professionally, which required me getting up quite a few mornings at about 4 a.m, setting up the turbo outside so that it didn't disrupt anybody sleeping inside, putting my hat, gloves, pretty much every piece of clothing I had on because it was pretty dark and cold. This is not the summer. And getting my training done. That was the only way I could fit it in before I had to go and start a full day of work. So it definitely took some commitment, But you do start the day feeling pretty good once you've completed a good session.
You are mental. I think for me, Paul, obviously the whole point of this podcast really is because I can, and it's about talking about find a way to make things work, isn't it? And it's about that attitude of like being part of the solution. I can't remember how long ago that was we had that conversation, Chantal, but for me, you summed up everything that for these because I can for me in that one moment, because I think I've met many people that are as focused on making it work as you are, as in, okay, this is my outcome, this is what I need to try and achieve, therefore how do I do it? And there's kind of almost no concept of this isn't going to work and I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to need to do it differently to make it work. I think, Paul, we've looked at that with all the guests we've had on before, haven't we? Very much that. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's been interesting actually. I think over the past year when the pandemic's hit, I've had to go back to looking at ways I can make it work and continue in the sport. And as Tim mentioned earlier, we have no funding as long distance triathletes, and therefore it all falls on your own shoulders to make sure you've got what it takes financially and with equipment to be able to go and compete and train. And for me, that required looking back and taking on some work that was outside of the triathlon world for a little bit, just to make sure that I was ready for 2021 when hopefully racing is going to be starting up again.
How do you do it? Because and at completely different levels here, obviously. I'm a bit lazy when it comes to keeping fit, and probably speaking to a lot of people, maybe out on their 20-minute run, listening to this.
Just for anybody watching, you can't see, or listening, you can't see Paul. He's got a beard, he's got wavy hair, he's got an old. I mean, he seems to be starting to get dressed, let alone go and do exercise.
Hey, this is how I was at school, and this is how I've slipped back into on lockdown.
25 years ago.
Just thinking about thanks, mate. I was just thinking about how you make it work. How when I've got to focus on keeping fit, I need to have a goal. I've got to have I'm going to beat Tim at the triathlon, or I'm going to beat Tim up and down the next hill or something. I've got to have a competition. I've got to have a reason. I'm not good enough to go out after work and go, oh, I'm just going to go for a run, or I'm going to get on the bike for no reason, just because I like it and I want to keep fit and stuff like that. Are there any tips? How do you do it? How do you get home after work? How do you get home when you're knackered, or you want to go out for a meal or down the pub? How do you go? No, I need to go out and do an hour-long run, or I need to go to the pool every day, really.
Yeah, great question. So for me, I think it is really important to have a goal, and when on the side, I also do some coaching with athletes, and during the pandemic time in particular, found it particularly hard, and myself included, not having a goal to train towards because everything kept moving, races were being pushed back, and you can become quite demotivated pretty quickly. So my tip to them was for us to set goals that they could do personally, and they could have a plan on how to get there. So we would maybe set in 4 weeks' time, you're going to do a 5K run, which is your normal 5K loop, but you're going to see how hard you can really go. And we build up to that and see what time they could achieve. And I kind of did a similar thing for myself, but it's slightly different because it's my job. I kind of have to just do it. And there are days when we're all human. There are days when I am exhausted and I really don't want to get out the door, or I would quite like to be able to go for that lunch with a friend. But there's a driving force behind me, which is saying this is where you ultimately want to be. And I know the rest of my competitors are just as committed as I am. And so that's my motivation to get out of the door. And during COVID times, I think I had a lot of positivity, and I remained optimistic that a race would come. There were about 4 times that was moved and didn't look like it was. It did look sometimes like it was going to happen, and then 2 weeks late before the race, they would cancel it, and that was pretty hard going, and it definitely mentally wore me down during the year. But I I took the leap to become a professional and left my full-time job because I felt like I could really achieve something in the sport, and I wasn't going to let the pandemic ruin that for me. So, 2020 brings new hope, and hopefully all of the training that I did last year will still benefit me this year.
I think one of the points you raised there, Chantal, right, for me, which is super important, and it's one of the points we've been making to the kids, the school stuff we've been doing, is that, it is, you doubt yourself, don't you? You have days and you go, I don't want to do this today. I don't want to get out of bed today. I don't want to do this ride today. And I've certainly spoken to you where you've been out for a run or out on a bike and you're like, that wasn't good today, or didn't want to do that today. But actually, for me, I think one of the really important lessons that people need to take out of this is questioning yourself is completely normal. And I think there's a perception sometimes that the kids think that athletes like you never doubt yourself. There's no doubt in your mind, I'm going to be champion, and that's that, and away we go. And actually, one of the things we've been saying to people is, no, what makes Chantal extraordinary actually is the fact she doesn't quit and doesn't back off. So even though she had the same thought processes, which is doubt, don't want to be here, not into it, that is completely normal. What makes you kind of not normal, I guess, or extraordinary is the fact you don't stop. And we've been just trying to say to people, just because you doubt yourself or question yourself, of course you're going to question yourself. Why, you'd be mad not to question yourself.
Yeah, and I think you can achieve great things out of questioning yourself, because life is all about exploring how deep you can push yourself, and that's not just in sport, that can be in anything. And we're all hardwired to like a challenge and to fight for the best for ourselves. And I think sport allows you to find what you might be capable of, and even if it doesn't do that, it's a fantastic break from your normal day-to-day churn. And I find that a lot of people who do just do sport but for the enjoyment of it actually find that they, despite the fact that it's maybe hard sometimes to get going, or they really don't feel like it, and even when they don't have a good session, and I'm the same, there's still lessons to be learned from that, and that makes you feel better because you know what to do next time to improve on yourself.
I think what's interesting, I know you won't mind me talking about it, it's something you've sort of battled with a bit, and it ties quite well into Kath, when we talked to Kath Bishop, actually, with her book, The Long Win. It's this concept of what are we focusing on the right things? And I think that's quite interesting, and I've watched you evolve a little bit over the last sort of few years to go from this to talk about I need to win, I need to be on the top, I need to whatever, to talking about your own personal performance, and that's very much in line with what Kath talks about, which is focusing on the controllables, and you can control your own performance, you can control your own training regimes, you can't necessarily focus on how your competitor is going to perform that weekend. And I think we had a chat once, didn't you? You took away some of the metrics, didn't you? You took away some of the numbers. Is that right?
Yeah, so I actually can train completely without data these days. I did used to use a lot of data previously, and I did.
Because come on, triathletes, you have a reputation for being geeks. I mean, you literally can't go for a walk without measuring it and then putting it on something to show everybody else that you've measured it, can you?
Yeah, totally. And I think there are a lot of people who still don't do a double take when I say I don't use anything. I do have all the computers, I just don't use them. And I think for me, it kind of goes back to the sport I did as a child, which was rowing. At that time when I was rowing, you didn't have gadgets. Boats were, they were pretty much your boat and your oars, and that was it. And you might have had a stroke rate meter, but that was pretty much all you had. And so you were in, and the only thing you were in control of was how hard you were working, and that was all driven by what your brain was telling you and your body. And so I think I learned early on to understand what different levels are in my body and how hard I can push myself. And I think that sometimes for me, the numbers held me back, because I'd be so fixated on having to hit a certain number, or if I wasn't quite hitting it, that I wouldn't actually achieve what I could in a race or in a training session. And I think, we're all pressured by numbers. I was pressured by numbers at work, and then to come home and have to do a training session where you had to hit numbers after a very stressful day was actually quite tiring and stressful for me. And I feel that since getting rid of all of those things, it's actually opened up the opportunity for me to really push on in my training. And there are some times where I do check just to see how fast I'm running. I'm not going to lie.
You talk about gadgets in rowing, right? I can remember a session, and at the time we were doing okay. It was a couple of national championship silver medals and whatever. And I remember our coach tying straws to the rigger. And when I say straws, I mean actual drinking straws. Yeah. And then the idea was, as the boat went through the water, you got a spurt of water out of the straw, and you were to try and keep that consistent to show that your rowing stroke was consistent. So the sport of water kept up. And I just thought, oh, how the world has moved on. We're no longer sellotaping drinking straws. I mean, they're plastic, so we definitely wouldn't be allowed to do that anyway. But sellotaping drinking straws to the rigger, it's like pretty bonkers, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Quite like the idea of I'm going to remove myself from Strava now and assume I'm doing 18-minute 5Ks. Happy days. Done, I'm done.
It does put a little bit more
race day. Then how does that? God.
It does put a little bit more pressure on the racing side of things. Well, I say pressure, but the racing is where you show how far you've come and where you need to improve on. So there can be long periods of time, and particularly during the pandemic, where I've got to be honest, I knew I was feeling strong and I was incredibly fit, but I couldn't tell you if I lined up on a start line whether I'd have produced my best performance, because I just needed to be able to. That's why I race quite a lot, and I'm a racer at heart, and I use racing to give me those sort of sticks in the ground to know, right, okay, this is where we're at, these are the things that we need to work on, and then push on for the next race.
And how have you balanced, because obviously the transition between training, having to earn a living, all that sort of stuff, how do you balance that? Where do you find that? Because a lot of people find that really stressful, don't they? You and I have talked to some of our clients before now about not necessarily triathlon, but people have got like kids and schooling, and homeschooling has been absolute chaos recently, and trying to like juggle all these balls. I mean, you are living proof of that, because I know you're a professional, but you've still got to somehow earn a living. That you don't get a wage, if you see what I mean. It's not like signing for Man City, is it, or whatever. So how have you found balancing all of that? What's the trick for balancing that, or not?
Yeah, signing for Man City, that would have been a good shout, wouldn't it? Sadly, I've never had much of an inkling for the sports that pay lots of money. So I think the key thing really has been always knowing why I get out of bed in the morning and what I'm striving to achieve. And there are times where, look, I'm human. There are days when I feel incredibly stressed.
You're a machine. I've seen you out running inside.
by having to juggle multiple things. But I think that I'm very organised, and I have to be able to get everything I need done. And I produce a lot of, not timesheets, but before I go to bed, I pretty much know hour by hour what I'm going to achieve in that day. And
wow.
If something, I do allow myself to let something slip. So if I've already gone past that time frame, I haven't quite finished something, it might just have to slip into the next day. But the training for me has to be the priority. So that happens completely and 100% every day. And there might be some early mornings and some late evenings where I'm trying to finish some work that might have slipped that I needed to do in the day. But yeah, I think the key thing really has just been, when you're really passionate about something, or you have important things in your life. So if you're comparing to sort of homeschooling and the difficulties in managing that, we all pick a path to be on, and we choose how our life is going to be, whether that's having children, whether that's having a sport, and it's our responsibility to have to juggle those things. And the key really is just to do it to our best ability, because nobody is a hero and no one does it perfectly. And it's okay to accept not being 100% perfect. The key is finishing the day and thinking, I gave everything, and that's the day done.
And try to focus on where you did get to, rather than the 5% that you didn't get to. But
yeah, exactly. And writing those things down, I kind of made a promise to myself in 2021 that at the end of each month, I mean, you could do this every day, but at the end of each month, I'm going to do an appraisal for myself, because I find that I very quickly move past achievements that I have accomplished, because I'm always thinking about the next thing. And actually, that's not very healthy. you should celebrate the wins and the things that you've succeeded at. So that's sort of my commitment to myself for 2021. So I'm doing it with my fiance, but we're both writing them down as well, so that we've got a checkpoint, and then setting a goal for what we want to do better than the month ahead. So
Eddie's definitely copying your homework. I know it. He's definitely copying your homework. Probably we should mention that one of the funniest stories my funniest moments was the whole of Sandstone. Everybody's a mental health first aid trained, so we thought we'd do that'd be a good thing to do. And Chantal, in fact, came down and came and saw us and was part of that course as well when we were doing it, and it was delivered. And because Chantal was with us, we thought we were in London. And I was going to say, instead of going to the bar, before we go to the bar, what we thought we'd do is we thought we'd all go for a swim, and we would take Chantal as our team coach, and we'd all go for it. And we had a couple of clients with us as well, and we thought we'd have his team swim. It'd be a really healthy thing to do before we go out. And all of our guys and girls came down, and it was all pretty cool. And obviously, I'm used to hanging around with Paul. So when Paul says to me, "Oh, I can't do this," or "I'm not very good at that," what he actually means is I haven't quite made the national team yet. And Chantal obviously coaches kind of elites, and it's the same sort of thing. We say to Chantal, I actually can't swim. What I actually mean is I can't qualify for the national swimming team. Give me another month. So that's the sort of banter that's usually going on. And one of the guys who's with us, Merlin, he won't mind us telling his story, had turned around to Chantal. He was like, and I can't swim, Chantal, so you have to coach me. So I think Chantal had kind of slot straight into that, Tim and Paul mentality. We probably had various Scottish rugby players with us and all sorts who are like, yeah, sure, I'm not quite national team. Anyway, so Merlin jumps in, and we had a lot of splashing and Googling about the place. And it turns out Merlin actually can't swim. And the fastest I've ever seen Chantal move down a pool, I think, was actually not in fact coaching lessons. It was to stop Merlin drowning, because it turns out he actually couldn't swim.
He still got in. He still jumped in. That's a lot of faith in your coaching ability there.
You did a great job.
He did an amazing job. He swam 4 legs and didn't drown. I mean, it's literally perfect. I think.
And then a few months later, did a triathlon. So
we did. He literally did. A year later, we did Blenheim Palace Triathlon. Yeah. And he still couldn't swim. He still couldn't swim. So dare we ask, as we sort of move towards the end, Chantal, what's the plan for this year? Any idea at all with the dates and stuff? Or
I have actually got a race confirmed in 3 weeks' time.
Cool.
It could be a little bit interesting. We have massively pulled back on my training because we thought everything was going to be a late season start. But I just we're throwing me in. We're going to use the race as a kickstart for my next training block. And I think for me, it's just, the ability to shake off the cobwebs. It's not a big race. It's just a local race. It's actually out in Spain. And just to shake off the cobwebs, see where we're at, and kickstart the training year, I think. The racing year, sorry. It's looking very positive this year that there will be a lot of races that go ahead. So I think it's very different landscape than it was last year. And I'm really excited to get back to doing what I really love.
Do you know what? I love the fact you're just going to go and have a go. We've spoken about this before. I think you and I had a phone conversation after one of the races that hadn't gone too brilliantly for you. Do you remember? I think wasn't it mid lockdown or in between lockdown or something? I can't quite remember what.
Yeah.
It was there or thereabouts, wasn't it? But I said to you, I was just so sort of proud of you almost that you'd gone and had a go. You actually just put yourself out there and went and did it. And Paul, we talk about analysis paralysis quite a lot, and I think the same is true also when we take on these adventures and expeditions, and all 3 of us here have done that sort of stuff, and so many people don't do it because they're afraid. They talk themselves out of it before they even start. They're worried about not being a hero or not getting the best result or not winning or not making the summit. And I just think if you don't start, you stand no chance, Paul, do you think?
Well, you remember we had Katie Ford on a couple of weeks ago. She was talking about imposter syndrome, basically being your own worst enemy, and having that little gremlin on your shoulder just whispering, "Don't do it, don't try, you're going to fail, it's going to be a disaster," and it's just trying to keep that gremlin under control, really. And I imagine for the endurance athletes, for the long distance athletes, that must be even harder because you've got a lot of time to deal with your own mind, I suppose, haven't you? As you're out there just listening to your own self.
Yeah, and I think, fear of failure I definitely still suffer from that. And it's a hurdle to overcome to be able to go and race, because I am an incredibly competitive person, and no place other than first is good enough. So I'm quite hard work when I finish third on the podium, and people can't quite understand why I'm still disappointed with that. But I think, you've got to put yourself out there, and there's a lot of times where we hold ourselves back, and throwing myself in the ring, trying to I think, push myself past that obstacle of, you might fail, it might be awful, you might come last, but just to go and enjoy it for the sport that I love doing. And if not now, then when? Because it's already been a long time since I've done proper racing, and you need to start somewhere, and actually just throwing yourself in when you're not quite there is a good way just to, you know in the back of your mind you're not quite there, so there's not so much pressure, but there's an opportunity there to really see what you can achieve even when you're not as fit. So yeah, I think for all the people out there who think, oh, I'm not going to give that a try because I might look stupid or I might be too slow, I would just say go and give it a go, because what's the worst that can happen? And 99 times you will find that you actually really enjoy it, and you'll probably come away and be going back again next week to do the same thing again.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. If I could ask you for one more top tip, and it's a personal thing, because we've talked about this quite a lot, and as somebody that suffers a little bit, being alone with my own thoughts and stuff is not always brilliant for me. Sometimes that leaves me in a kind of dark place on occasion. And some of the stuff that I've talked about with Because I Can are coping strategies that I've come up with to help keep me moving through those dark moments. And I can't think of anything more tough than what you go through, because you are literally on your own for hours on end, and you are pushing your body to the point where it doesn't want to play anymore, which by definition plays tricks on your mind. Talk to me about how you keep moving through that long dark time on your own.
Yeah, so it's definitely been a learning process to get to the point where I can work through those times. I think I'm so focused on what I'm doing that often time kind of goes quite quickly. And I think if people say, you're going to swim from this point to this and that to that point. And whilst you're swimming, what do you think about? Well, for me, it's thinking about every single stroke and being completely focused on it. So when I've reached the other end, all of a sudden all I've been thinking about is the next stroke. And it's the same, there are obviously little bits that come in, but you have to zero yourself back to being focused on what you're doing and being in the moment, because those, few moments where your mind floats and you're thinking about what sandwich you're going to eat later, or, what the person behind you might be thinking, those are moments where you're probably not giving your all to the task at hand. And that's kind of one of the things that I've really tried to zero in on. And I also find the other thing that can be great when you're having a bit of a tough time is there's some fantastic podcasts out there by numerous different athletes from all different sports, and CEOs and things like that. And I used to listen to quite a few podcasts because I find it really inspiring to hear other people's stories. And I think that can be a great way to push you past the dark moments and actually take some good takeaways that you can apply to your own life.
And you know what? And that ties almost bang on to what we talk about, Paul, business as well, doesn't it? We touched on something, as you well know, we talk about keep your eye on the big picture, keep the inspiration going, avoid the middle bit, which is probably you're thinking about the sandwiches and what happens next. And actually, arguably, your strokes is one step at a time, isn't it? It is that this stroke, then this stroke, then this stroke. So no, I think that ties up really, really well. I think we're looking forward to hearing from you a few announcements for this season, aren't we, in terms of sponsors and stuff, which we're not allowed to talk about, but it's really, really exciting. And really happy to see that, we're going to still be involved with you, because that's exciting. And also excited to see that other people can take you on to the next step. So, literally proof that it's making it work. So we love having you on board, and we're looking forward to that. So, guys, thank you very, very much for listening. For those of you that just want to reiterate that, it's Chantal Cummings. If you go on social media, please give her a follow and a like. She's certainly, quite inspirational for us as a team. She's been one of our ambassadors for a reasonably long time now, actually. And if ever you think that, you're having a bit of a moment, then just log on to Chantal's social media and realise you didn't run for 11 hours today, or whatever it was she's been up to. So Guys, we'll speak to you again shortly. Take care.
Thanks very much.